problem with that. Just don't
Hi, I'm Don Moores, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The League of Women Voters of the United States is finishing a large study of agriculture in the United States that has included food safety, as well as the people who are raising our food. Elaine Apter from the League is here to talk about this issue with us.
Thank you.
Plans to build a new facility for Washington Adventist Hospital in White Oak are well underway. Rob Jepson from the Adventist Healthcare is here today to tell us about where the new hospital is going to be, as well as what's going to happen with the campus on Tacoma Park, where the people in the community can receive healthcare services.
Good to be here, Don.
Montgomery Coalition for Adult Education Literacy, otherwise known as McHale, is searching for persons in the community who share a concern for anyone who's currently unable to read and understand English. Kathy Stevens, Executive Director of McHale, is here to talk about this issue.
Thanks for having me today, Don.
McHale, the Mental Health Association, has added something new to its newsletter that will help all those who are looking for information about mental health care and issues understand the problems in our community a little better. Scott Merkin, CEO of the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County, is here to tell us about this and how anyone in our community and everyone should sign up to get a copy. So, Elaine, welcome back.
Well, thanks. It's great to be back as usual.
Food.
It's amazing, isn't it?
You know, we think of you all dealing with concerns in the community, and it should be no surprise that you're looking at agriculture, because what issue affects us all more than food and agriculture?
There's no question about it. You say agriculture meant most people think of the farmer, but every meal, every time you put something in your mouth, the government is involved in the whole process, and it does start with the farmer. Research and development. We've just had the new farm bill where insurance is playing a big part, best practices, and the government is very involved in that. But then come on to the food on your table, and we look at the two main things would be safety and labeling.
Right.
And safety, research and development, checking projects, genetically modified food is very in now as far as labeling.
Well, you know, you think about today compared to not just a generation ago or even 10 years ago. Everything we buy now in this community, because everybody's working so fast, working so hard, quick, is all pre-processed, prepared. We don't see getting a bag of potatoes so much anymore, and raw foods that we're creating meals from scratch. It's almost all prepared. It makes
and the question is, who's inspecting this along the line? Is the inspection mandatory or is it voluntary? With the cattle, a lot of times now, they're saying, well, the farmer or the corporation should actually do the inspections because we don't have enough people. The government doesn't.
Is there a shortage of people to do the inspections?
Oh, there's shortage of people, and of course financing.
Right. Who pays for it?
Who pays for it? Every time you have all this inspection or research, somebody has to pay for it, and basically
and what's the
it's
research?
the federal government.
Does the inspection definitely lead to safer products on our tables, or where's the gap there in terms of?
It depends upon most of the time, and we've been in luck. Yes, we're okay. However, the spinach outbreak, the lettuce outbreak, it does happen, and the more and more some of the places where people are really concerned about the cattle feeding, where they're not roaming around. And same thing with the chickens, and a lot of chickens together. One of the things that's involved in that is more pesticide use because the spread. It's just
probably a lot of different ways it affects all of us.
No question about it.
How much of it is it just federal versus any of it specific to Montgomery County?
Some of it is Montgomery County, especially with it's more research and development help for the farmer. Maryland College and Maryland University Extension plays a big part in helping farmers and how they can work without pesticides or become organic. The state also, things like runoff, the Chesapeake Bay, We've had the deal with the chickens and
Sure.
the manure and the nitrogen
Well, the
running
pesticides.
off to the Chesapeake Bay.
But
They're
let's
the
not,
states
but
involved.
let's not forget
we
that
can
the
get
largest.
anywhere.
But let's not forget that the largest source of pesticide runoff in the Chesapeake Bay is not from the farmers; it's from us. It's our
I
beautiful,
agree wholeheartedly.
beautiful green
Cemented,
lawns.
yes.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I think I didn't eat before we taped this, and I think I'm going to go without eating after listening to this. But I know that just a personal experience, my wife had cancer, and she sort of, when she recovered, she recommitted herself to make sure that she ate whole foods whole and tried to avoid foods that are not processed. And to your point, Don, I mean, it's especially tough, and it seems like in this area, everybody moves at warp speed. It is not easy to eat the way we really should eat.
Right.
It's very, very difficult. It's time consuming, but it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
I think part of what you're doing that's especially helpful is education. I mean, people need to be aware of this, and pushing for labeling is important. It seems like now when you go to the grocery store, and maybe it's just me and observing this based on personal experience, but you see people constantly looking at labels. You didn't see that anymore. So I think
Yes.
what you're doing is really important so people know what they're
We've
eating.
got about 30 seconds left.
Okay, and even the expansion of labels, we use so many things like organic and GMO and some of those things. What do they mean? We need more information. And on label, allergies is another big one.
Right.
We need labels. This contains peanuts, this contains gluten, or doesn't.
What do you hope
So-
to, at the end of this process, because it's winding down, what do you hope to see changes in Montgomery County look? What do you want them to look like?
I think basically if we can get more farm to like the CSAs where
We don't know
you
what CSA
I
was
know
that?
you go directly from the consumer to the farmer, farmers markets,
Okay.
things like that.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome back, Rob.
Thank you. Good to be here, Don.
So the Adventist world is in flux, or in change, I should say.
Well, actually, everybody in healthcare is in change, but for us especially, we're very excited about our project. Washington Adventist Hospital is the oldest hospital in Montgomery County. It was founded in 1907 in what was then rural Tacoma Park. It was a place where people escaped the harsh living conditions, the crowded conditions of Washington, D.C. Now, not so country as they used to say. But the hospital is an important linchpin in healthcare access for lower Montgomery County, parts of Prince George's County, and even a small sliver of northwest Washington, D.C. But the hospital's really challenged because healthcare has changed quite dramatically.
But now you're going to be moving out to White Oak, I understand.
We are, and so we're facing really some challenges on our current campus. We have a small campus that's inaccessible. A lot of our patients come from Langley Park, Prince George's County. There's no Metro bus access to the campus. When you get on campus, if you drive, you can't park. Our facilities are old. So what we're proposing to do is to build a modern facility in the White Oak section of
Okay.
Montgomery County on property that we own right off of Route 29.
Okay.
It's accessible, will be accessible by Metro bus, accessible by ride-on. So the patients that we can currently serve will be able to continue to access
Okay.
the hospital by automobile, by bus, by any
Great.
means. But one thing that I'm particularly excited about, that we're excited about with this project, is we're not leaving the Tacoma Park campus. We're actually going to maintain robust healthcare services, mainly outpatient services, but also some inpatient services. We have a 40-bed behavioral health unit
Okay.
that will continue there. We have rehabilitation services. We'll have physician offices. We're also, just a couple weeks ago, we began seeing patients in conjunction with an organization called CCI, a federally qualified healthcare center.
Sure.
So for patients in our community who may not have access to insurance, who may have low income, may not have a medical home, this creates an opportunity for them.
What
Not
great
only-
synergy that's going to create there.
We think
Fantastic.
so, and the state, actually all of the country, in the wake of the Affordable Care Act, but especially the state of Maryland, is now changing quite dramatically its reimbursement method. So what the state is going to is to actually incentivize people to stay out of the hospital and
Okay.
encouraging hospitals to keep people.
Speaking of government
Out of-
regulations, in building a new hospital, in the changes in the health care, what new things do you expect to see in a new hospital?
Well, private
changes?
rooms are particularly important to contain, because of infectious diseases. Private
That's
rooms
really
are
good
important.
to hear.
It's
Yes.
not just
Gotcha.
it's not just a luxury. It's not a
No,
luxury. It's really
it's a
become a
need-
necessity.
it's a
So
need for
private
everyone's
rooms, more clinical space, more access to outpatient services. Our campus is very kind of inpatient focused, and that's one of the challenges we have. Physicians are a key driver of healthcare. The partnership with hospitals are important. More physician offices on campus, better access, better parking. Really, it's the type of I think services that the community needs.
How long does it take to plan something, of this scale? How many years? And I
That's
imagine just as
a-
you're saying
Decades.
about
sensitive
Yeah.
Right,
question.
right.
Yeah.
But plus,
But
because
it's-
healthcare keeps changing, it must be very challenging from a business standpoint to figure out, meeting the community's needs while meeting changing regulations and services in
Right.
healthcare.
It's very challenging, especially right now. It's probably the most challenging time. Right now, we're going through a pretty intensive regulatory process with the state. We have to get approval from the state. Part of what we've done, to your question, is we've actually slightly downsized the hospital, because when you have private rooms as opposed to 7 private rooms, your capacity actually is greater. In addition, the state is incentivizing hospitals to actually work with providers like our federally qualified healthcare center to try to
That's great.
prevent not only unnecessary readmissions to the hospital, but also try to keep people well and out of the hospital, which
Preventive
is
care.
preventive
Yes.
care,
Sure.
which is a good thing.
Right.
Right? We have a
Right.
sick care system now, as you
Right.
know.
We want to prevent
We
it.
want
Yes.
to, we're transitioning to a healthcare system, and this facility is a key part of that. So more outpatient services, private rooms, more access, better access for those who may not have access to a car, more parking, better integration with physicians.
It's about a minute, but just a quick point. I did a lot of work as a Peace Corps volunteer with an Adventist
Sure.
hospital that was in Sierra Leone,
Okay,
in a leprosy
good.
hospital. And preventive health care, good care, I mean, not sick care, but,
Right,
but
right,
people living good,
right.
healthy lives, that's a linchpin of the Adventist faith.
It actually is. It really is. In fact, Washington Adventist was founded as a facility in 1907 to treat illness and disease, but really to promote some basic, what were then groundbreaking aspects of healthcare: exercise, healthy
Right.
diet,
Right.
avoiding substances that can harm you. And so we're coming full circle, which is exciting. And it's good to see, Don, the healthcare system begin to allocate dollars towards prevention and
right.
focus on well care and prevention rather than just sick care.
Right.
All right, well, that's it for this first half of the program. We'll be back to talk about literacy and mental health care in the second half. We'll be right back. And we're back. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you, Don.
The key fighter for adult English literacy in our community. Tell us a little bit about McHale and why it's so important for you that more people get involved.
Sure. Well, we are a community coalition of 60 organizations serving 20,000 people a year. So in a county of 1 million people, that's pretty significant. And we know there are people out there who still want to learn English who can't. So I want to make sure that all of our partners in the community know about us, and we figure out a way to help them connect with us and support literacy, because literacy is the linchpin to everything else you do in your daily life.
So who are these folks? Are these folks who Montgomery County Public Schools failed and just sort of progressed, or they
Well-
are new arrivals to our community? Who are your
Primarily, Don, you
folks?
know that after the 2010 census, we're a majority minority county. So most of the people who want to learn English are newer neighbors for us. On the census, we have probably over 150,000 adults who identify themselves as what the lingo says is limited English proficient. That's
Okay.
LEP. And there are some folks who are native English speakers who some of our organizations like the Literacy Council serve, but primarily they're newer members of our community who are looking to be able to do whatever their goals are in daily life. Get a job, help their child in school, access health care, call 911 for an emergency, shop in the grocery store for food and be able to read labels. They want to be able to do all that.
I was listening in some of the immigration debate around the
Yes.
State of the Union address. One of the things that someone who's very much anti-immigrants saying is that these immigrants don't want to learn English. They just want to speak their own language. Are you saying something different?
I'm saying something very different. People want to have the tools they need to be able to participate fully in community. I mean,
And
who
that's
among
English.
us? That's English. Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons that we actually have become involved in your organization is because there's a direct link between health status
That's right.
and adult literacy. So if you think about a child growing up, if the parent is illiterate in English, how do they help their child with medications?
That's
how
right.
do they access information that not only keeps themselves well, but their child and their family
Right.
well? So there is a very, very strong
But-
and direct link.
And there's a
between-
direct link between that and education too. One of the strongest indicators for a child's success in school is a parent's literacy.
Right.
We have such a rich education system here that people want to take advantage of.
Well, going
We can
back
do
to
this,
going
yeah.
back to Rob's comment, also on the other side, if a parent is facing a medical crisis, the provider doesn't speak that language, then the child is in the very uncomfortable position of translating
Translating,
what could be an
yes.
awful sounding thing
Right.
about a parent's
Right.
condition.
Right.
Right. And this, Don, is why we want people to know about the services that our organizations provide, teaching English. It can take, on average, 6 years for someone to become proficient. So we want people to know about it, get connected with us. We have board vacancies available. We have all kinds of support things that people can do on a volunteer basis. This is the invitation to become
How's
involved.
industry involved? And a lot of times their specific reading skills for certain industries, do they get involved in helping?
Our
with the
business community is certainly involved, and I think the key here for me is for every dollar invested in adult education, you get a $3 return to the economy. So if I'm a business person, I want to make sure that my employees are at capacity in terms of what they can do, their skills are up to speed in terms of their literacy, and customers. It reduces mistakes, it reduces waste, it reduces miscommunication. So it's a really important place for businesses to be involved too.
Kathy, I imagine with all the changing demographics that the demand for your services is just increasing enormously. So how are you keeping up with the demand, and is it that there's a real need for more people to become involved to meet that demand?
Yes, there is. It's a great question, Scott, because the demand continues. People are continually coming to our county. We welcome that, and at the same time, we know we can't always keep up with the classes. So we're looking at enabling our providers to have more support so that they can have more classes, have more seats.
We need to
available.
enable you by letting us know what the phone number is if somebody wants to get
Sure.
engaged.
I would. Here's the kiss of death, right? I'm going to invite people to call me to become
Go ahead.
involved.
Okay.
301-881-1136.
Okay, say it again.
301-881-1136.
We got about 45 seconds left. What do you want to add about the joy that comes back to those volunteers?
Oh, well, it's priceless, as you can imagine. Helping someone with the basic skill of literacy to participate in their daily lives in our community, it's enriching for everyone. So it gives back to the community as much as it gives to that person.
What type of time commitment you need to do that?
There are volunteer positions all over the place with different time commitments. Certainly, we can talk specifics about that.
But you're the organizations, and so it's your coalition of organizations contacting Mikhail,
I
you're
can help
helping to screen,
facilitate.
and then getting these individuals to
Right.
one of these organizations.
Absolutely.
And they could be a full-time volunteer to no time, right? You
Yes.
just- Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they should
Thank you.
volunteer, right?
Call me and volunteer.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Kat. Scott, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So we go from literacy to mental health, and there is something I think to be said about a link between all of these topics because they are key to our community, and none key more than mental health.
Right. Well, definitely mental health, how people are feeling, their economic status, affects their mental health. And mental health is actually a really broad definition, particularly for our organization. Many times people think of it just as mental illness, but it's your overall mental health and well-being. And our organization really has been doing a lot more work to educate people in the community. We already serve about 10,000 people per year, but as Kathy said, we're in a community of 1 million people. And so we're trying to make discussing mental health much more approachable, more interesting in terms of pop culture and how mental health is portrayed so that people aren't afraid of talking about it because it's an important part of everyone's life.
Right.
Do you think that, or have you found that as much more knowledge about the brain has been disseminated, that as we're learning about the chemistry and the electronics and everything else that's going inside our brain, that it's becoming easier for people to discuss mental health, not as stigmatized, or is it still?
That definitely is happening, okay, as people realize that, particularly, serious mental illness, that there is a biological component, right? And it's not something that you just can't see. But at the same time, even something like that, for a lot of people, I think it's not, again, I'm using the word approachable because you're talking about science as opposed to every day. There was something in the Washington Post today about, the stress of commuting, okay,
Right.
and what it does to
Yes, I saw
people's,
that.
mental health and
Right.
wellness. We actually have, for people, we send out wellness tips, stress tips,
Well, wait,
anxiety
what-
tips.
I bet they can find those tips on your website.
Right.
can't
We
they?
actually have.
What
go
is
to
that website?
MHAMC.org.
Okay.
And there's actually lots of things you can get. There's everything from ongoing, we send out, we use a lot of social media. Again, overall stress and anxiety tips, things related to, we just had the New Year's and New Year's resolutions, to looking at pop culture. I'm a big fan of Downton Abbey and depression.
too.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the whole thing with Mary and the depression and how media portrays,
Right.
grief and loss, which was actually really interesting is they sort of showed her wandering around the halls, but back in the 1920s in England, people with depression would have literally been tied down to their beds until they went over it. So we're trying to make it
So
something.
how are you making this more approachable for people so
Well,
they
we're-
don't get scared off
well,
by
we're
that
first of all
image?
pointing out where things are happening and then educating them
Mm-hmm.
about what's happening and actually the tremendous progress that we've made,
Right.
And I think the more that you can get people to see about it and talk about it, the more that people are, less afraid and they realize it affects, everyone. I mean, 1 in 4 people in any given year have a diagnosable mental health disorder, okay? And that could be from just anxiety, ADD, all the way through schizophrenia. And then add their families and friends and you have, the whole population is affected by mental health issues.
Do you
Before
think, if I could just ask a question, do you think the stigma has gone down? Do you think it's sort of plateaued? The reason I ask, I worked for a behavioral health facility back in the 90s, and I know at that time you had to fight the perception that mental health was a weakness. There was a weakness, just kind of buck up. And so I wonder, from your perspective, if over the past 10, 20 years, have we seen a lowering of the stigma, or is it kind of the same, or I know
So
there's no way to measure it.
There actually are ways to
scientifically.
measure it.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
people do studies like the CDC, SAMHSA, NIH that looks at stigma. And there definitely has been a reduction. I think some of the challenges, though, that we have in Montgomery County, going back to what you're talking about, the changing demographics, is how mental health is looked at in different communities is very different,
Cultures.
right?
Right,
And it's
sure.
not one size fits all. And so there's different ways you need to approach it. There's different levels of stigma. And so we're figuring all of that into our work. But
Also, the elimination of the mental health institutions that have put so many people with mental health issues just out somewhere trying to cope on themselves. What is being done to counteract that?
So
help
that's
them?
actually really interesting because people are looking at services in hospitals and as you talked about preventive care, so you don't have people that have to be readmitted. It is still an issue where people are trying to figure out what to do. Like right now in the Maryland legislative session, next week there are hearings that relate
right.
to the issue of involuntary hospitalization of people who have a major psychiatric illness. And actually MHA is going to be tweeting from the hearings.
Okay.
So people can get information about it by just, again, sign up on our website. But we are making a tremendous amount of progress. And again, mental health doesn't just equal mental illness, and it's people's overall, emotional state and their mental well-being.
Well, I like what you said earlier, Rob, which is a healthcare system as opposed to a sick care system.
Right.
It's you're talking about that as well.
Oh, 100%, and everything from, when you're talking about business of lower absenteeism, lower, I forgot the exact term, but like people being present in their current job, right? And as opposed to thinking about the concern for their family, loved one.
Well, we've got to think about our loved ones as well here, and our loved ones in the viewing audience. That's a great final word here.
Thank you.
I want to thank you guys for joining me
Thank
here
you.
today. I want to
Thank
thank
you.
all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I invite you to join us next week at this very same time.